It's a warmer day. It's actually it's approaching 37 actually, because it's Australian summer. Best time of year when you kind of just wish you were dead if you're outside, and wish you were outside if you were inside. The best kind of year. My internet's working quite slowly right now because I'm a bit too far from the modem, so my wave app isn't working. Oh, here we go. See, it's nicely 34 degrees. We'll be reaching 37 within the next few hours. So let's get a move on. We're going to talk about, in this video, Lily James review films. So I'm reviewing a collection of her films, as I usually do. So what films are we going to do? This is like less artistic than my Johnny Depp one. That was like still set during summer, but like it was like the shittiest looking day, and it was like a week of complete storms. So that was dramatic, I guess. So something I actually did yesterday was I filmed the first part of this review for my film yesterday. Okay, so yeah, that's how we're doing this. My first review will be for the film yesterday. After that, we continue with the Guernsey Literary and Potato Peel Society. I'm mainly kind of theming this first set of reviews about the past. Also because yesterday is a pun. We'll get into how much I like that film. Should I be standing in the sunlight instead? It's a bit much. I could use a tan, but I'm not that desperate. Next up, we have in our past collection, Jesus Christ, we have Darkest Hour. Then we continue on with another war-torn film of The Exception. Now, coincidentally, two more of the films in the list, this being Pride and Prejudice and Zombies and Disney's Cinderella, of course, are technically set in the past, but because it's historical, it's not really historical, because it's more or less fiction, that's period piece fiction, I can film it today instead of having had filmed it yesterday. And last but not least, we of course have the fun, boppy musicals that she's been in, this being Mamma Mia, Here We Go Again, and actually I don't have it here, don't I? No, okay, I realized this yesterday whilst doing my first review. I haven't yet reviewed Baby Driver. I will note in shortly as to why that is, but I do promise that there will be a review of that at the end of this video. So I guess I'm going to stand out here and tan for a second, and then I'm going to go back inside, hope that the washing is done, put on the line, finish doing my chores, watch the next episode of Watchmen, and then continue doing this review. Excellent. Cool. I hope I don't step in a dog shit, so... it burns. Poof. Fuck, no, really? Oh, okay. Hi. So that's a bit annoying. I was going to do my Baby Driver review right now, but it turns out, as much as it was the third or fourth film I watched this year, it was actually, what was it? Was it the third or fourth? It was the fifth film I watched this year, and I did not write a review for it. I logged the review. I believe I gave it 4 stars, but given that I've still got a week or two, I mean, it won't come out for a while, so I have more than enough time to film that extra clip, so that'll be right at the end. I actually plan to watch it with my girlfriend soon, so hopefully that'll happen before Christmas, and then this can come out after Christmas, as in next year, given that it's 2020 right now. I totally isn't 2019. Oh my god, it's 2019 still. Hi, how's it going? So, instead we're going to film something that kind of represents 2019 in contrast to today, which is 2020. We're talking about yesterday, which is 2019. We're talking about the film yesterday. I wanted to make a pun out of that, but it's a fucking dumb title. Anyway, do I even have a quote for this movie? I have a review for it. Don't know if I have a quote. So in Yesterday, she plays a block of wood who is the love interest in a film that's not really meant to be a romantic comedy, but kind of is, and I don't like it that much. It's one of those things that's like a wasted idea. What's her name in it? Ellie Appleton. Ellie Appleton. What did my review for it say? Oh, there's my quote. Oh, wow. Alright. I'm going to do my Letterboxd review. I gave this film 2.5 stars. My quote, I know nothing about his life because he's a product to me. I think that's what Kate McKinnon says. I like her character. She's goofy. I like that. She's an exaggeration. But I mean, most of these characters are, except for the ones who are meant to be real. I guess it's good to get the bad film out of the way first. The best moment of this film that has actual consequence was a fake out presented by a dream sequence featuring James Corden. Yuck. Spelling error there. It's meant to be out instead of ow, but that's totally fine. It's a written review. Who needs to spell check what they write, right? Yeah, exactly. I like the use of Olada. Okay, I'm very sure it's Obladi. Okay, I don't care anymore. I can't even write anymore. Is it really Olada? That's weird. Anyway, so I guess that's something. Also, the use of the anti-American music industry subtext, which was the only humor in the film that I liked because, fuck capitalism and whatnot. Hey, we're speaking to the man with this movie that's a fanfic about if the Beatles weren't real, but were in some dude's head. Overall, the film felt flat and almost half-hearted, mostly an excuse for my dad to watch another Beatles-inspired film and to buy another cover album, which sucks. Both the cover album sucks and the fact that he's going to buy another one sucks. Look, I love the Beatles as much as the next person, actually maybe a bit more because I grew up with them, and I went from my period of loving them as a kid, hating them in my early teens, and loving them again because you kind of realize what they've done for music, and it's kind of the idea of me now as watching films and appreciating them on a technical craft outside of just entertainment value. Hence my appreciation for rewatching films, especially with this recent mindset of like, oh, it's a critical mindset, but it's like analysis and stuff, and I can understand subtext and layering and analysis and everything, and it's great. I mean, we were watching Chicken Run the other day. My brother was like, oh, this film, I've heard this film is about the Holocaust. I'm like, yes, well, subtextually, and I was going on about this thing, and he thought I was, like, trying to make a joke, but I was being legit, and he was actually surprised that I was being legit. I'm like, well, that's what my fucking course is about. Anyway, this isn't because I dislike the Beatles. I love the Beatles. Who doesn't love the Beatles? I just don't like a lot of the majority of the cover songs that have been made, and that's why I don't really like to see cover bands. I don't like to tell my dad that, though, because I don't want to, he likes the Beatles. He likes seeing the music played again. I'm like, look, I've seen Ringo Starr play live. I've seen Paul McCartney play live. I don't need to see the whole Beatles because 2 of them are dead. And I can watch their concerts on Blu-ray, which I did. I saw 8 days a week in concert, no, in cinema with my dad, which included the concert at the end of the film. This feels like wasted potential for a great idea with the inclusion, but with the inclusion of the final 10 minutes, I don't know how I would have changed it, outside of just generally attempting to make a better story and characters. It's a film. What else did I write about? Okay, what did Lily James do in the film? That's a good question. Thanks for asking. She doesn't really do much outside of be there for the main character at the start of the film, then kind of just exist and trickle in every now and again, and watch the protagonist from a distance until he's like, oh, I don't want to be rich and famous anymore for bringing great music to the world because I feel guilty about it. Again, the only other set of stakes is like when 2 people from 2 other countries like ambush him at his like big concert for his album reveal, and they're like, hey, we're not going to give you beef. In fact, we really love that someone who actually can sing can actually perform their music and, let us hear it again, and that's really nice. And it's like, oh, wow, conflict? Where's the conflict? I guess they just needed someone who can smile and look pretty and cry on command. I think she cries in this movie. I can't remember. It's a shitty movie. I mean, her character is very bland. Like, there's nothing there. It's just I think she's a school teacher. I think, and she's just like, I'm here for my friend. I have no interest in life. I have no character arc. Main character marries me at the end. I have no interest in life. I have no character arc. There's nothing to her. So her character is shit, of course. That's the writing. What about her? She's a good actress. That is very obvious, I think. So she's a good enough actress according to this film, but no one outside of the protagonist has time to breathe as a character. So don't watch this film for her. In fact, probably don't watch this film. Maybe, I guess. Kate McKinnon's interesting, and I like her in some of the films. This one in particular, I think she's pretty funny. That's just me. But again, because I appreciate that as her as a satire of the music industry. So yeah, originally my rating was 2 stars, then 3, because my dad argued this and that, and it's really smart with this and that. I'm like, look, I'm just looking at it as a movie and like what the movie presents to me. I'm not looking at it in the detail of, well, if Coca-Cola doesn't exist, if smoking doesn't exist, then the whole entire industry doesn't make any sense, and this movie doesn't make any sense. And then the whole Harry Potter joke at the end is just like, oh my god, I don't care. It goes from a gimmick to a gag to a piece of crap to like they're literally shitting down your throat. So that's why I gave it 2.5 stars. Because it's a decently made film. It's just, I don't like it that much. Even though it's decent. Like, anyone can enjoy it. The music isn't bad. It's nice to have an appreciation of the Beatles, even though, like, we don't really need a film giving us that, given that their 50th anniversary albums that have come out in the last 3 years have been top of the charts level stuff, because they're still fucking terrific. So yeah, it's not a bad film. It has good parts. I don't like it because of this and that and everything in between. It's just one of those films that just seems to be lacking something that I can't put my fingers on. Lily James is perfectly alright. Her character is crap, but she plays the part that she needs to play. She's not terrible, which is good. I just realized this actually isn't the worst film she's in. So that's more joy. But let's go into a different film now. Something that's a little bit different, and move to this side of the screen to make it more interesting for me as an editor, because I hate myself. Yeah. The Guernsey Literary and Potato Peel Society, otherwise known as Potato Movie. The movie. Yeah. I hope I put in text there, otherwise it's going to look really awkward. It's just going to be the poster of the fucking movie anyway. My quote, it feels like we've emerged from a long black tunnel into a carnival. Okay. This is a sweet film about hardship and loss and love and friendship, but it needed more potatoes. I guess I'll just kind of go into scrapping my review for it, but more or less just go into what she's like. I guess, do we need the plot kind of thing? It's set during and post World War II, where this island was taken over by Nazis. It's actually a British-occupied island, but because it's in the small little islands between England, the United Kingdom and, like, France, the Germans were able to take them over because the British couldn't stop them. And so you get what happened to these main characters on the island who ended up creating the Guernsey being the place, the island, Literary and Potato Peel Society. They created a society to read books and talk about books and stuff and eat potato peel pie, which apparently is terrible. They even state as much in the film. And our main character, who's Lily James, I didn't even write down her name. God, she doesn't have a good name in any of these films anyway. She plays Juliet Ashton. So she's a writer. She reads some letters, I think, from one of the guys on the island who just kind of writes about the place, or maybe he writes a letter to her saying, hey, I read your book, and I heard that maybe you could send us more books or something like that, and so she ends up sending the books, and then they trade letters, and then she goes to the island, and she meets them, and then stuff happens. She finds out what happened to the whole entire thing. It's a kind of a general story in a way. The first act is like, oh, here's kind of a vague impression of what happened, but more Nazi stuff. Then the rest of it's just kind of the consequences of that mixed with Lily James's character partnering with them. What can I say about her character? She's a nice leading role. Similar to other characters in terms of performance, as, you know, everyone played their parts well. This is just in terms of the whole entire film. She kind of has generic character traits. However, you know, she doesn't really love her fiance. Then she goes, she's passionate and creative-minded and whatever, and she must go where her heart takes her. So pretty much, like, anything Emily Bronte or all that stuff. You know, not very original. But at the same time, it's like, I don't exactly know if this is trying to be feminist in a way. It's like, I guess, because it's like, oh, she's free-spirited and stuff, and she will travel where her heart can take her so she can write proper books and stuff. But then, you know, her fiancé is a rich American dude, and she doesn't really love him, and then she, of course, meets a guy on the island, and of course she falls in love with him, because we're going for the average kind of story. Her parents are blown up by Nazis, all the extra stuff, you know, we've all been through that. They're based on real characters, real people, real characters. They're based on real people because apparently it's based on kind of a true story, so there's that. England likes their war stories. So, pros of the film, it's a nice way to capture a wartime story, something that you probably wouldn't really hear of, about the smaller islands and stuff like that, so that's interesting. It's well acted, it's well shot and well directed. A nice film to watch with the obvious tragedy elements of what happened before the characters met because of the war, of course. Overall, I gave this film 3.5 stars. It's just a bit better than average, in my opinion. It's one of those films that you'd go out of the cinema or end your viewing and be like, that was a really nice film, but then you'll forget it a few days later because it's not memorable, and Lily James is still good in it, which seems to be a trend here. Yeah, it's a perfectly alright film. I mean, hell, it's about potatoes, kind of. But if you think it's more about potatoes than it actually is, it makes it better. I thought it was set in Ireland when I went to watch it, and then it turns out, nope, it's about England in the war against the Nazis. So that's fun. Turns out there are, in fact, a lot of films that she's in that have to do with the war. And I guess because I'm on that trend and I can film this all kind of in one go, not the whole entire video will be set up here, but, you know. Let's talk about 2 more films, then we'll call it quits until our next shot tomorrow, because it's already getting warm enough in this room, and I'm getting tired. So next up we're going to talk about Darkest Hour. I gave this film 4 stars. My quote, "My father was like God, busy as well." Not as interesting as it could have been, however, it's still a good expression of a politically focused war film. Now, I say not as interesting as it could have been, even with the 4 stars, because it can kind of get boring. It depends if this is your kind of film, because I guess the main thing you have to keep in mind outside of Oscar-baity film and Oscar-winning film, for good reason, the factor that remains is just that it's a film about politics. It's about wartime politics, how a country coped during wartime. And that's the whole plot of the film. The whole plot is about Winston Churchill becoming the Prime Minister and how he is able to tackle the war in his first, month and a half. And that first month and a half is completely focused on Dunkirk, more or less. It builds into Dunkirk, and then that becomes its big thing. So, of course, this is a kind of really great predecessor to the film Dunkirk. You know, this is about the politics and the strategy and the shit that they had to go through as a nation to be able to get all of their soldiers back. So it really gives you the dire consequences, especially if you have no setup for that in Dunkirk. Even though I think they actually give you a written text thing at the start of the film. Either way, you can go straight into the Dunkirk movie after that, and then you get a really great payoff with 2 hours or 2.5 hours of pure... what do you call it? How long does it go for? It's an excellent film. I have the 4K because it's beautiful. 106 minutes. Actually, it's really short. It is so much shorter than I thought. On 4K, definitely the best way to watch it. Not just because it's 4K, but because you actually get a lot of the IMAX shots, so it's very beautiful. A lot of action, a lot of tension, very well executed film. Oldman, of course, Gary Oldman, is undoubtedly terrific and submerges with the character of Churchill within his first shot on the screen. A really great way to introduce a character, probably one of the best ones I've seen in a long time. For reference, he literally is just in his bed in the shadows and just lights a match to light up his cigar, and then the light goes out, and then someone opens the blinds, and then he's there. It's just like, whoa, very nicely done. So the directing was strong, yet fueled a tone that if you didn't get behind it, now this could be because you fell asleep, or because you don't like grumpy old white men yelling, oh, it's like politics was only grumpy old white men in the 40s. It's just some stuff I read up on, mostly on Letterboxd, or like the negative reviews are like, oh, I fell asleep during this movie, it's so boring, or, oh, it's just old white men yelling. I'm sorry, it's a period drama. What were you expecting? Other coloured people to be there? Women to be there? Yeah, it's a historical film. You're not exactly going to get that. It's like people who complain that Dunkirk didn't have any black people in it. The British Army didn't have black people. The only black people you see in the film are French, because the French weren't really, well, at least weren't that bigoted. Not really at all, really. But still, it's all about facts and realism and stuff. Yes, this is old white people yelling the movie, but it's also a really nicely kind of patriotic towards England, and it shows a good tense period in history for England especially, and really for the world. So yes, it can potentially be boring or cringy if that's your beef against the film. So what? Outside of that, I was with the film throughout its entire runtime. There was maybe a 10-minute period where I was getting tired, but that's just because it got a bit slow. This is maybe around the end. I think this is around maybe the middle of the second act. You're kind of getting the same information repeated a bit, and it gets a bit boring. But I was also quite tired. It was quite late at night. Long day kind of deal. But at the same time, arguably, that is probably the weakest part of the film. But the rest of it, especially the first act and the final act, really balance out quite well. Of course, the second act is quite long, but at the same time, it does work really well. It just builds up a bit slower than you'd expect. However, the first act and the final act are rather prominent and strongly led, mostly due to its focus on Churchill's actions that lead to his final speech, and how he understands the people, everything. I think this is one of those films that doesn't have great outside characters, people who surround Churchill. Churchill is great. Lily James's character is a representation, whereas the king is a representation, and that's Ben Mendelsohn too. And then you have, you have his wife. So you have 3 different representations in Churchill's life, all displayed by these 3 key characters. His wife, who I can't remember the actress' name. The actress is Kristen Scott Thomas, who plays Clementine Churchill, and Lily James, who plays Elizabeth Leighton. So, and who does Ben Mendelsohn play? George IV, 6? 6. They all play respective roles. The wife being his personal life, Lily James being the public and the people who are strongly affected by the war because they have loved ones out there and it's a struggle for them. And of course the king, who is controlling the whole empire. That's like his boss kind of thing. So you're getting all these different perspectives laid onto him, and he has to deal with it all. Lily James's role expands into her pretty much talking about like, think about the people. What do the people think? And then you get this big scene of him on a train, which is quite well pulled off. I mean, again, probably the cheesiest scene, but at the same time, it does what it needs to do. So the side characters weren't much, but of course they were obviously just playing their elements. The cinematography was well designed and even artistic at times, and really kind of encapsulated the mindset of Churchill, mostly through like a kind of claustrophobia of like one tiny box of the frame is him, the rest is blackness. So it's quite well done in that regard. The music too was actually really good. Overall, it's a pretty decent film that, as many have noted, does work well in collaboration with Nolan's Dunkirk. On note of Lily James's performance, she's empathetic. That's pretty much her main role. You have empathy for her, you have sympathy for her, and hence you have sympathy and empathy for the British public. She plays the assistant slash typewriter for Churchill and doesn't contribute too much to the narrative outside of the bystander's point of view. Like, hey, I'm the public, I represent the public, I have a brother who died in the war, I know what everyone else feels because I'm with them. She even says at a point in the film, like, I need to know, I want to know what's going on because no one tells us anything. And, that brings up so much anxiety and fear in all of the public. So hence, he shows what's going on. He's like, this is what's happening. So yes, she is pretty much the face of the British public until Churchill actually meets the British public in the train scene, as I mentioned before. She's really only there to type, like she has an actual physical role in the film in terms of what her character's job is. She's not like just a person that he just chats with every now and again. She's actually important in the narrative, given that she's the one who writes the stuff that he tells her to write, like his speeches and his letters and his telegrams. But yeah, mostly outside of that, subtextually, she's there as a representation of the British public. This is not a film I recommend watching for her performance, as the standout performance is clearly Gary Oldman. She's still really good though, of course. I wouldn't say her role is overtly prominent. She's there. She's very strong in the film, but again, she's like Ben Mendelsohn and the character and his wife, Churchill's wife. They're just there, not playing very strong or anything in particular characters, but they all have their representations on what they mean to Churchill. Decent film. I mean, look, if you're okay with watching 2 hours of people talking, which I'm not against, and you're, I guess, I'm trying to face this less as it's politics and more as it's survival. It's how the politicians, the people who governed a whole country, a whole nation, were able to decide what was going to happen with their soldiers before their soldiers were potentially, inevitably, if they would have been, completely killed off by the Germans, by the Nazis. But of course that didn't happen because it's Dunkirk. So yeah, next up, lucky last for this shot, we have The Exception. I'll start off by saying I gave it 3 stars. My quote, "One day we'll all be dead." This is going to be my short explanation of the film. Is it a trend to have films about Nazis who are actually good-hearted people that play the role of the brainwashed soldier until a cute and naked woman, who's usually Jewish because of course it's Nazi Germany, comes into their life? If so, this is probably one of the best in that catalogue of films, in which to say it's not exactly original, but it's interesting and compelling to watch, even if its attempt to humanize at least one Nazi is still a key characteristic in its narrative. So, of course, if very politically minded people of these days with, Trump America really hate Nazis, especially given that this film came out in 2016 when that was a big thing. I mean, argue it still is, but I haven't heard much about it for the past few months, which is good. There is, of course, this big thing about humanizing Nazis, but at the same time, logically and probably most accurately, most of them were just German soldiers who were, some of them brainwashed into being these evil Nazi types that we see in movies, or that we know most of, like, Goebbels and Hitler and all those big ones and whatever. But then, of course, there were just the German soldiers who needed a paycheck. They believed in their country, maybe not exactly and wholeheartedly all the ideals of the Nazi regime, but at the same time, they believed in their country. So for them, it was patriotism for the fatherland over, dedication to Hitler. So, yeah. I'm not exactly trying to excuse every single Nazi soldier. I'm just saying that some of them might not have been bad people. That's actually what this film is pretty much trying to say. And Jai Courtney, of all people, is our main character who plays a captain in the SS who is this person. He goes to protect the Kaiser Wilhelm, who is played by Christopher Plummer. I think this is slightly non-fiction. No, this is slightly fictional in terms of, actually, this is an adaptation of a book that is fiction. But, I think the Kaiser still survived to some length. I forgot that part of my history course. Anyway, who cares? Old, white, fucking, goddamn monarch. So he wants to come back to Germany to reign again as the king, but lives in like a completely different country in Europe that the Nazis have just taken over, or just invaded more or less. And so they've just found the Kaiser, and they're like, okay, let's get this captain who cannot go to, and fight because of his war wounds to go and protect him. And of course, he ends up falling in love with Lily James's character. Who does she play? I actually wrote this down. She plays Meek De Jong. Also, I should note, this film still definitely clarifies the Nazis are evil. I mean, it just kind of justifies the two different types of Nazis. The ones who are just German soldiers, like Jai Courtney's character, and the ones who are like Goebbels and all those bad people. That much is obvious, and it's actually very well portrayed for our character as well, because the Jai Courtney is human, whereas the others are pretty much like the Terminator, except not strong or cool, just evil. So yeah, he falls in love with Mike De Jong, however you pronounce it. She is a Jewish girl who wants revenge for the death of her husband and father by the SS, but falls in love with Jai Courtney, who is the lead and sympathetic Nazi. Whilst working for the Kaiser, she's one of his maids. A new maid, in fact, who is also communicating with the British, because she's a British spy. Wow! A lot of things happening there. It's an alright film. It's decently shot. It's got some interesting choices of music and stuff like that. Good performances all around. Jai Courtney actually acts. Credit where credit is due. Also, he goes completely naked in this film. That's pretty interesting. But he's modest. He doesn't care. I read that in a review. So let's just... Christopher Plummer is also really good in this. So what is about her performance? She again does not fail to convince us of her talents, and I'm not talking about her nude and sex scenes. She's a good actress. That's what I'm trying to say. That much is certain, and this film just adds to that catalogue of her being a great actress. Yes, she also gets naked in this film, so that's a plus if that's on your actor bingo card. Her performance is great. It's a pretty decent film. Again, a lot of these films that she does are war-related. Usually all of them are World War II. Hell, you've had, of course, The Exception, which is meant to be a poetic title if you watch the film. Then you have, of course, Darkest Hour, and the Guernsey Literary and Potato Peel Society, whatever the fuck it's called. They're all war films. The rest, though, Yesterday is a musical, kind of, but not really. Then there's Baby Driver's an adventure film kind of thing. It's fun, it's different, wacky, and whatever. What are the other ones I watched of hers? I know we watched Mamma Mia, Here We Go Again. We'll get to that. I won't save that till last. That's impossible to save till last. Cinderella as well, kind of a musical, and then Pride and Prejudice and Zombies. So yeah, in my next take, which I'll film tomorrow, because it is clearly totally not December right now. That'll be my next thing. So I'll see you tomorrow. Good night. Excellent, now we're in continuity again. Because of course I filmed that clip you just saw yesterday, to emphasize the pun of it being yesterday, even though in reality it was actually this morning. But if you go by biological clock, it was yesterday. Anyway, it doesn't matter. Time is irrelevant. This is still 2019. So in regards to that, we're going to talk about two films that are set technically in the past, as they are period films. However, they have no real set period of time. I feel like Pride and Prejudice and Zombies probably does, and Cinderella arguably does as well, but they don't really clarify, and it doesn't really matter given that Pride and Prejudice and Zombies is a period drama anyway, so it's like, oh, they wear old-timey clothes, and it's England, so it's probably before the First World War anyway. It's probably in the 16 or 1700s or something like that. And then, of course, you have Cinderella, which is a fucking fairy tale, so who gives a shit about what the hell the time is? Let's talk about Pride and Prejudice and zombies. So I guess I could do a detail of the plot. It's Pride and Prejudice, but there are zombies in it, and it's leading to the apocalypse. So, yeah, that's pretty much all I can really say about it, because it's kind of confusing. Like, if you have read or seen Pride and Prejudice, you know exactly what's going to happen, but then, because it has the same story beats and whatever, like, it literally is the exact same story, just like in an hour and a half instead. Actually, it's an hour and a half. It's just over an hour and a half. It's 98. It's 108 minutes long. So, okay, I can read this part then. So I gave this film 1.5 stars. What a whopper! To be fair, I had actually seen this before, and I rewatched it the cheapest means possible because I didn't want to have to pay for it. Because I don't think we paid for it last time. I think we just watched it because it was on Foxtel. Either way, my quote is, "Every savage can dance, while I imagine even zombies can do it with some means of success." Because, of course, they're period piece film, so zombies are very elegant creatures. It's very kind of strange, and I don't like it. Anyway, so Matt Smith and Lena Headey, who you might know from Game of Thrones, know exactly what movie they are in. Too bad no one else does, including the director, who actually wrote this as well, because nobody apparently realized this was a comedy, except for Matt Smith and Lena Headey. Because Matt Smith especially realized it was a comedy, both because of the character he was playing, but also because he's like, oh, this is just meant to be silly, right? Because it's a parody. And Lena Headey's like, oh, this is a parody, so I'm going to just, like, be, like, an over-exaggerated evil person, but she's not actually evil, but she wears an eye patch anyway. So, yeah. Unfortunately, the romance drama doesn't really flow in this film, given the parody aspect that this film is, of course, meant to be. And the horror is really too cheap to be frightful or tense. So, in terms of, tone and theme, the film kind of fails miserably. But let's talk about Lily James. So, of course, who's actually dating Matt Smith, which I find rather interesting. I'm not much of a gossip or care much about gossip, but still, I find it interesting. I really like Matt Smith. I grew up with him in Doctor Who. Anyway, so Lily James plays Elizabeth Bennet. Of course, she's the main character of the film and the main character of Pride and Prejudice. That much is obvious. And I guess she's alright. Like, I've seen Keira Knightley, and so yeah, there's the Pride and Prejudice from 2005, directed by Joe Wright, that I've seen, and Pride and Prejudice, the miniseries from 1995, which I have also seen. And do you recall, I didn't know what time was as a kid, so like I grew up watching this and thinking it was like a movie. That's why I was able to watch like all of the extended editions of, The Lord of the Rings without complaining. So Jennifer Ehle, I guess, it's E-H-L-E, it's hard to pronounce, I guess, plays Elizabeth Bennet in the Pride and Prejudice 1995 miniseries alongside Colin Firth as Mr. Darcy, who I still would argue is the best Mr. Darcy of all the iterations I have seen of the character. And it's shockingly a lot of iterations of the character that I've seen, whereas the version in Pride and Prejudice and Zombies is just, I don't know, he plays an alright Darcy, I guess, because he's meant to be stubborn and stern and whatever, but still has this kind of romanticism to himself. But, like, I don't know, the added aspect of them all being very violent people because they have to fight zombies is kind of changes the aspect to the characters a bit too much, and the film doesn't really account for that outside of, oh, look, there's zombies, hoo-hoo. It's kind of spooky now, and there's the apocalypse, but it's not really funny. So it's meant to be a parody, but it's just like a send-up of the original, and it's just like kind of dumb. Anyway, so Elizabeth Bennet, of course. Yeah, as I said, she's okay. Lily James, like, she's not bad, but I think because, of course, they have this added element of it's not just a portrayal of classism and romanticism. It's also, like, as Jane Austen had originally wrote, it's also this whole aspect of now they're all female warriors. Their class is still emphasized in that because they're if you're rich, you learn Japanese martial arts, but if you're in the poorer classes, you learn Chinese martial arts. So, yeah, which also kind of seems almost race-baity at the same time, because it's like, oh, because Japanese people are better. I think it's just because Japanese people are, or their fighting techniques are meant to be cooler than Chinese, but I don't know. I mean, like, in this film, they pretty much demonstrated as in one tiny scene, plus the fact that Mr. Darcy uses a katana, so... Yeah, I don't really see how much of their choreography was actually inspired by, martial arts, but I might not have really paid attention to it. There weren't too many fight scenes anyway where they weren't using muskets. So she doesn't really provide much to the character unless she happens to be fighting someone or something. So that aspect is probably the most changed aspect, which defines her completely differently to every other Elizabeth Bennet. But I don't think it works so much. I mean, like, it works enough in the context of, hey, they're fighting zombies, so it's kind of like this almost uber-feminist fighter film, and that's kind of like it. It's kind of... It needs something more to it, I think. So in the scenes that she is fighting, she's either being a badass, and she's actually able to emote, and that's, like, pretty much it. It's, like... The conflict is like, let's focus it in the fight scenes, like the emotional conflict. So there is a scene where Bennett and Darcy fight, and it's meant to be representative of a scene in the book and the movie where they actually do have an argument, and it helps to develop their thing. I think this is more of a rushed version of it because it really just solidifies as quickly as possible. But they use it in a fight scene between the two of them. They're just like throwing furniture and stuff at them. I think it's meant to be comedic. But then the only actual comedic part is after they've fought, Matt Smith's character comes into the scene and he's like, oh no, it's such a lot of valuable stuff, Brooke. And he just makes a joke of the whole thing and it's hilarious. But that whole entire fight scene that I guess is meant to be either romantic or hilarious and fails at being both, just kind of, yeah. I understand that her character is meant to be more restrained and almost noble, but still somewhat, the childish girl at heart when she's with her sisters, even though if she's not dancing with her sisters, she's fighting them, and that's because they're training together. So, again, it's like, oh, all these really eloquent dialogue scenes would just be, oh, it's boring, let's just add a fight scene instead. But they're just, like, training. And that's just like how this movie thinks. If there isn't a zombie or if there isn't a dance, because that emphasizes romanticism, then it's a fight scene because they're talking, or it's comedic. Like the dinner scene with Lena Headey and Matt Smith and Bennett and her sister, and I think Darcy as well. Yeah. And the other guy who's actually the bad guy, whatever the fuck his name is. Although in this case, when she is with her sisters, the play fighting isn't childish bickering, like with a sense of amusement, but it's literally, of course, portrayed as fighting. So I guess it's also kind of meant to be a pun, like, oh, hey, get it, because they're meant to be play fighting because they're girls, but then they're actually fighting because there's an apocalypse going on, but they're still having balls and shit because I guess it's still Pride and Prejudice, people are still idiots. However, she does, of course, showcase herself to be a strong, independent female. And overall, the character is much like she is in the source. But of course, the film still is pretty iffy. The acting's fine, though. I mean, Lily James is perfectly fine. I still think the standout is Matt Smith and Lena Headey. And Lena Headey is hardly in it, but when Matt Smith is, he kills it every time. So, yeah, let's talk about Cinderella. I was expecting to hate this, but I had actually, because my girlfriend got Disney Plus, because, we all like the leech of other people's accounts, thank you, Netflix. Her and I watched the original Cinderella together from 1950, which is an interesting film given how the majority of it is about the animals, not about Cinderella. So that's fun. And so it was a nice idea to watch that before watching the remake, mostly because you have the context of A, this is a remake, and B, given how the modern takeover of Disney remakes has kind of become a shit show, like The Lion King, Aladdin, Dumbo, all of that crap that nobody asked for and that nobody needed, and that overall will only be relevant, at least The Lion King will only be relevant when the apocalypse happens and we have no more nature left because global warming would have destroyed the planet. So we can at least look at The Lion King and be like, oh, so that's what it used to look like. Fuck, that's cool. So I watched this both in the context of it being a Disney remake and, of course, it being a Cinderella, with Lily James as Cinderella. So her name is actually Ella, but the stepsisters call her Cinderella as a mockery because she wakes up one day next to the fireplace, and she has ashes and stuff all over her face. So they call her Cinderella as a joke to tease her, to be dicks, because they're evil stepsisters. So it's interesting. My quote, of course, is, "I'm your hairy dog father." Do you get it? Because she's about to say, "I'm your fairy godmother," but then she says, "I'm your hairy dog father," but then she corrects herself. This is Helena Bonham Carter. I can never pronounce her name. She's actually pretty decent as the fairy godmother. She's the narrator, but she's also like only physically on screen for like 10 minutes, and she's fun the whole time. So that's a perk. I gave this film 3.5 stars out of 5 because it's just that bit better than average. So it turns out they can actually do a good remake, and it kind of makes me wonder why they haven't been capable of doing it since. And I think that's mostly due to necessity. This film actually, in terms of it being a remake. Okay, I should read what I've actually written, because I don't know what I wrote, because this is like a month ago that I wrote this. So this is honestly the best live-action remake, and I can see why. Was it necessary for this version to exist? Arguably, yes. Given that the original film, which I watched a few days prior to this version, is a lot less narrative-focused and a lot more about the animals, which I guess adds to the runtime, and of course, because it's a movie for children. This version, however, cuts that out and fleshes out the characters and the relationships better instead, which is the best thing to do for a remake. It's like, okay, we'll take the source, being, in this case, the original film, and like, okay, well, we're not going to do live-action animals as much, so let's just, good, it's done, I can hang out in the next 5 minutes. So it's like, we can just, scrap all the animal parts, focus on the characters. We'll give, like, Cinderella a backstory with her parents, get them, like, a whole relationship thing, give the king and the prince a proper backstory and a proper relationship outside of just the king decides everything and the prince is just a piece of cardboard, and give this, the stepmother and the stepsisters more of a relationship outside of, oh, let's just have this 5 minutes of exposition saying what happened, and then just jump into Cinderella's the slave and whatever. And so that's really well done. It adds to the feel of the film. It gives you more of an aspect of who Cinderella's character is, and the tragedy that she goes through with the loss of her mother, then of course the subsequent loss of her father, even after the stepmother has been married into the family. And it's pretty well done. So it was quite nice. Like, you compare it to something like The Lion King from 2019, a film that doesn't need to exist because the original is perfect. That's literally pretty much a shot-for-shot remake of the original, just without the emotions, and it looks real, and I don't like that, and nobody does. But then, of course, you have Cinderella, where it's like, well, it's real, and you can still have that whole fairy tale aspect, because not really I wouldn't say girls of this generation would watch that, like young girls, aiming because it's specifically family-friendly princess film. I wouldn't exactly think young girls would be watching that. They'd be be forced to watch these subversive stuff like Frozen, or they'd be watching like 90s cartoons like, say, Aladdin or Mulan and stuff like that, which again has, well, not exactly Aladdin, but Mulan has the more pro-feminist agenda to itself. Again, nothing wrong with feminism, I'm just saying. But this one is like, hey, no one's going to watch the 1950s version of Cinderella anymore, because it's not exactly outdated per se, but it's like the way it's being made is outdated, not the animation style, but the factor of the narrative. And not all audiences can get behind it because it's, it's family friendly, yes, but it's so focused towards children, given that its protagonist is more or less a rat, not Cinderella. So let's scrap all that, remodel it so it's for all audiences and anyone can watch it, and that's why it's so highly rated. And I can wholeheartedly agree and understand that. Also, the costuming and the production design is very nice. The acting alongside with the directing is pretty good as well. I believe Kenneth Branagh did this one, which would make sense. He's done a lot of those kind of Shakespearean romanticism type films, especially period drama stuff. And of course the CGI that is in the film, which is more or less the small animals and the transformation scene where the animals get turned into the carriage. and into people, more or less. It isn't too distracting. I mean, there probably definitely is some more CGI with like the house in the distance in one of the opening shots and all this other stuff. But for the most part, they utilize a lot of practical stuff quite nicely, or at least you can't really tell how much of it is CG. The most obvious stuff being the animals and the animal transformation people stuff. So, yeah, I mean, I believe even Helena Bonham Carter, when she first appears as an old lady, is practical makeup. If it's not, then it's not. But at the same time, you can't really tell, which is nice. So it's not an overdose of CG that really stabs you in the eyeballs. Lily James, on the other hand, is wonderful. She's actually pretty terrific as Cinderella. She's obviously attractive and pretty and someone that young girls can like aspire to look like if you don't have a problem with, skinny, pretty blonde women being your role model. I'm just saying, it's a thing that modern audiences also dislike, but still, it's not like they're going to make Cinderella black anytime soon. Okay, that's all I've written, so let's put it this way. Do I think she's an okay role model? I mean, yes, but less in what she looks like and more as in how and why. So in this case, because of the stuff that she's been condemned to, pretty much literal slavery, which I'm not going to get into the race stuff about that, but like the fact that like she's in the worst position possible, and the aspiration is you go from the worst where you've been tormented and having the shit put on you every day, and then you become something bigger than yourself and something better than yourself, and because you are still a true to life nature good person in your heart, as Cinderella is and how they enforce throughout the whole entire film, it works. So of course the whole, it's an aspirational because she's a skinny white pretty woman. I mean, look, that's of course an aspect to it, and of course she is a skinny, white, pretty woman. Do I care about that? I mean, look, as the guy who's watching this film, she's attractive, and that's really all I need to care about, I guess. But like, if I'm looking at it as a film, I can understand why audiences could be iffy about it, but I think of all the Disney remakes for them to have done, I think this is probably one of the best. Mostly because you don't have the stuff like, the True Love's Kiss from Sleeping Beauty and Snow White, and I was going to say more of them, but they're the only time I know that actually have True Love's Kiss. Either way, you don't really have that problem, and you don't have to cast like short people to be dwarves for Snow White, and you can't really characterize a character who's like asleep the whole time. But at the same time, they've still done 2 Maleficent films, so I haven't watched them, so I don't really care. Nor have I watched the Snow White live-action remakes, because there have been so many live-action remakes. Anyway, point being, this film can be familiar if you avoid the princess aspect to it. If it just happens to be, a girl gets a makeover to look prettier, but realistically she always looks pretty in the face, and that doesn't really change. Her hair gets styled, she gets a better-looking dress, and but I guess that's why they had the introductory scene of the prince meeting Cinderella while she was still in her, maid clothes, because it's trying to emphasize that he likes her face, yes, but he also likes her personality and what she represents and like her ideals and stuff, and that's what he likes more of exactly her looks. Of course, he still probably thinks she's attractive, and then when he sees her in this big blue dress, he's like, I don't care, it's you, and you're what's important. And maybe that's also what they were emphasizing there. Hey, it's you, what is on the inside that's important, not what's on the outside. But of course the film still has that, what's on the outside is also, I guess, makes you shine, I guess. I don't know, it's kind of mixed messaging. I think it depends on who your audience is. I think it's an alright film. Again, I gave it 3.5 stars. If you're going to have a problem with that kind of stuff, you're more than welcome to have a problem with that kind of stuff. I mean, but it still is a fairy tale, so it's like, what exactly are you expecting? The original fucking Hansel and Gretel where they get eaten by a witch or some shit like that? Like, you're not going to get that kind of grim fairy tale stuff here. You're just going to get generic Disney romanticism. So, whether it be a problem for you, then it's a problem for you. If it's not a problem for you, then that's perfectly fine. It's just another film. Yes. Yes. So, now we're probably going to talk about arguably my favourite Lily James performance, and arguably my favourite film that she is in. which is interesting. I mean, I still love. I like the majority of the films that she has been in, but I will be honest. Out of all the ones I've watched for this review, I will definitely say that Mamma Mia, Here We Go Again from 2018, yes, is arguably my favorite performance of hers, and probably my favorite film that she's been in, as her being a contributing aspect. Like, I really like Baby Driver, and I'd probably say it's a better film, but we'll get to that after this in the next clip, because I won't be able to watch it for another 2 weeks. Yay! Got to get those 500 movies done, because that's how I'm doing things. Wow, actually, this one might be a better film. Hard to say. Alright, I gave this film a whopper of a... Not gonna say yet. I can't. Cool, alright, so I didn't actually write anything specific about her character, so I guess we can just get down into improv. So my quote is, "And Bill is receiving an award for being the greatest Swede of all time." It's just a funny kind of gag, so I really like that line. So, firstly, I'd love to note that this film has too many amazing transitions. Like, it has a particular one-shot take for a musical part, but then it's like all of it is through like transitions from like one set to another set through two different locations. And like me watching it is like, oh, I see how they could do that, because either these are two fake sets put right next to each other, but also like you can use this as a green screen thing and just go right through, and suddenly it's this actual image that's been filmed at a later time, and this and that in between. It's kind of obvious stuff as to what goes on. The transitions are very obvious, but then from the very first transition, you're like, holy shit, we're going from a postcard to reality. What? This is already crazy. So I'm going to compare this film a lot to the first one. So where the first one experienced cringe, bad singing, and narratives that didn't quite tie together, whether narratively or thematically, this sequel succeeds. I think I gave the first one maybe 3 stars? I think 3 stars, because it's really painful to watch Meryl Streep and the guy who played James Bond, Pierce Brosnan, sing. It's really terrible. So, yeah. So, firstly, the use of music is outstanding. From thematically appropriate song choices to score-only encores that reflect back to important moments in the first film. I note that because it literally uses score only, so without the lyrics, of songs that if you hadn't watched the first one, or if you hadn't watched the first one like just before watching the new one, you wouldn't see it or you wouldn't hear it. But there were moments where like they use a song that they use in the first film of Donna, this being Meryl Streep's character, dressing up her daughter, this being Amanda Seyfried, for her wedding, and they're both singing a song about how her daughter's grown up and how she's sad that her daughter's going to be leaving her and this kind of stuff. And so they reutilize the score of that in the scene in Mamma Mia, Here We Go Again, where the exact same thing happens, where she's growing up, she's going to move on, that kind of stuff. It's thematically relevant. It's very good filmmaking. The reutilization of songs from the first film, either used for fun or to reinforce theme or emotion of the scene or character. Now, of course, you have stuff like, them singing songs that you saw previously in the first one, but then they're actually using that narratively to be like, oh, hey, I'm singing this song because it actually relates to how I feel right now, but also because it's a fun, poppy song, but it's about the fact that I literally just broke up with my boyfriend, or he dumped me because of this or whatever. And then there's just a whole collage of songs that are like that and that are actually used really clever, or like really well done, and because it becomes a part of mostly the Donna and her singing group, they end up using that in the prequel, the one that came, the first one, which so it's set in the sequel moment, so it kind of cleverly calls back to that. Additionally, the film isn't a song a minute like the first one. The first one is just like, every time you get a chance to breathe, suddenly another song is on. It's just like, And like some of it's just for fun. The first one's like a jukebox musical. It's like, it's just for fun. It doesn't take itself too seriously. It has enough character and enough heart to it and passion to get through it, but for the most part, it's pretty terrible and cringy. yeah, it's not worth watching, but at the same time, it's best to watch it and then watch this film to really get every aspect of this film. Also, to really understand the story, kind of. The film utilizes the score, which is still ABBA songs, of course, but removes the lyrics so one can appreciate the characters and the world of the film. Secondly, the narrative focuses on good reflection between Donna's independent new life and Sophie's. So, of course, you have that prequel element with Donna, who, of course, isn't Meryl Streep anymore, because it's young Donna, who, of course, is played by Lily James, who is incredible and gorgeous. And does a lot of dancing things, and it's fun. So, yeah, they really give her the title of Dancing Queen for a reason. And, of course, that reflects back to Sophie, who's now 5 years older, even though this film came out 10 years later than the original. And she's opening the island for public use. They actually have remodeled the island since Meryl Streep's character of Donna has passed away. So, which is good. I think it's good use of her character and a good arc for her to get around. Like, you know, she's still going to be stuck on this island once she's done building this, you know, this whole entire hotel in honor of her mum. What is she going to do next? So it's pretty well done. So what else do we have? So though there are present continuity errors in Donna's parts, as in the looks of the character, especially Sam, who's played by Pierce Brosnan as an adult, from the flashback versions of them to the versions of them in the first film, which, I mean, realistically is fine. Like, they use flashbacks in the first film to show, like, all of them being young, but still them playing the same actors. So it's still Colin Firth as young, this actor, and still Stellan Skarsgård, and still Pierce Brosnan, but then Pierce Brosnan has, like, long hair and a very thick and long moustache, and it's all meant to be a gag, but then this one, it's like they're actually going for realism, and they've completely recast the actors. They don't look anything like they did in those stupid flashbacks, which again were just a gag. So continuity error for continuity error's sake. At the same time, it's a gag, but you can also find it realistic. Of like, oh well, yeah, actually maybe he looked like that because of, you know, my memory plays tricks on me. But then they also show like photographs of it, and it's like, yeah, maybe not. And also they mentioned there's a gag in the first one where when Donna pops her head out of the little, like, kind of trap hole and sees all three of her ex-boyfriends there, and they're all like, or more or less ex-lovers, and, you know, she's like, I can call a boat for you guys to go home, and then Bill, played by Stellan Skarsgård, is like, I have a boat, and she's like, you have a boat? And then she realizes that she's trying to get out of there, and she gets out of there, but, like, in this one, he has a boat from the get-go, so... yeah, it's like a major part of the film, the fact that he has a boat. So it doesn't, I mean, again, it's a joke, but it doesn't exactly work in continuity, but at the same time, this film could only have made sense, the prequel could only have made sense if he had a boat to begin with. You know, so technically in the 20 years, she may have forgotten that he actually had a boat, no matter how many times they had sex or saved someone's life on the boat. So just, yeah, you know... however, these don't interrupt the story or the experience of the film. Sophie's story also nicely wraps up her arc from the first film, better than the first one did, whilst also connecting her character to that of Donna. Again, the flashback parallels work well to back this and the themes of the movie up. Overall, I could go into detail about the talent of this film, from the music to the costumes to the cinematography and visual transitions. Oh my god, I love these transitions. Even to the acting and humour, but that doesn't matter. What matters is the experience of the film. It's fun, it's energetic, and overall eliminates all the cringe that the first one made, at least me, suffer. Also, Lily James is stunningly gorgeous. Holy shit, do I have a new celebrity crush? And I would say, yes, I do. So given that, like, this is kind of my callback to my first actor review from 2019. So even though this video has been filmed in 2019, it comes out as the first actor review I have for 2020. And like, my Cara Delevingne video was me reviewing the films of a celebrity crush, and I think I watched most of those films in 2018 as it was, and then a few in 2019 to film it in 2019. But either way, the point being is that I think it kind of balances out, like kind of a callback to itself. So okay, what can I say about her performance? I mean, she's good. She's fun. She's energetic. She still shows that she can act really well. She sings, and can sing well. She really is stunning. And I'd say, I can't remember what the earliest film I've seen of her is, but I can definitely say that she ages gracefully, and to say that is literally just me saying she has looked the same for these past, 6 years, which makes sense when you're, like, a rich celebrity, always pretty much look the same for a long time, but at the same time, she just is killer. She's very good as Donna, especially. And yeah, there is a strong part of it, because she's only in, the film is say an hour and a half to 2 hours. She's in at least half of the film, so this is definitely a strong one if you want to watch a film that has her in it, especially something that shows off her talents as an actress, as a performer as well, because she sings, she dances, she does cartwheels for no reason, and I love it. This is definitely a good way to demonstrate that. If you don't like ABBA music, then yeah. But this is definitely better than the first one, as it doesn't have an absolute kind of cringe. Also, it gives you enough time to have the characters breathe and to have natural dialogue and character moments before jumping into the next song. And most of the time they jump into the next song because it's thematically relevant. And that's what I think is really key to the success of this film. It's all thematically relevant. Now, of course, there is the general audience who are like, yeah, it's fun. It's just, heartwarming and stuff. It's great because of all that reason. It's like, yes, it is, wholeheartedly. I just like to look at it more as what the film does as superior to the first one, but also what makes it as itself really sell itself. So I think my favorite part is probably outside of Lily James as Donna, I think is just those audio-only, score-only cues for the music that backs up the feel or atmosphere or theme of a particular scene. I think those two are my favorite parts. Also the transitions, but at the same time, the score is just so cleverly done, as well as, of course, it's a good movie, okay, we get it. Let's move on. Let's talk about Baby Driver, okay? Now, I'm going to awkwardly click this, but maybe I might actually remember to do... Sorry. Just music from this little clip here that keeps playing on repeat at the start of the Baby Driver Blu-ray. It's in my head now. So, our last review for this video of Lily James. Finally got around to watching Baby Driver again, because when I initially watched it as my 5th film of the year, I didn't write anything for it. I gave it 4 stars, just like I did last time, because it's a pretty great movie. I would have given it 4.5, but there are things that sway me here and there every time I watch it, and sometimes it's a film that you got to be in the mood for, Like yesterday I started watching it, got halfway through it, I just wasn't in the mood for it, but then I got to the part just at, when the last heist was happening in the film, and watching that today, I was in a different mood, I was in a better mood, so it just kind of was more funky and had more punch to it, and I really liked it, so I enjoyed it a lot more. I wouldn't have given it any less than 4 stars, that's for sure, but still. My quote, of course, don't feed me any more lines from Monsters, Inc. It pisses me off. Yeah. There are things that I like about Edgar Wright films, because I love Edgar Wright films. And of course I have all of his films, and I have seen all of his films at least 3 times each. I think this is the 3rd time I've watched Baby Driver now. I think the only other one I haven't watched as much is The World's End. I think I've only seen that twice. And I think that's probably my least favourite of his films, but I still think it's really good. It's one of those things, it's like you got one of those directors who's like, oh, it's like Tarantino, sometimes you might not like, Death Proof or Jackie Brown. I love Death Proof. I think Jackie Brown's still a good film. It's my least favorite of his, but I still think it's a really good film. At least 3.5 stars, at most 4 stars. Each film has its quirks. And it's much like an Edgar Wright film. Most people say he's topped off with his best stuff at Hot Fuzz, and I mean, let's be fair, Hot Fuzz is terrific. I still prefer Shaun of the Dead. I think it's a better, like, I enjoy it more as a film. And I especially love Scott Pilgrim vs. the World, as you may have seen in my Aubrey Plaza review, which is the second review I did in this franchise. So in this franchise of videos where I review actors. So yes, feel free to check that out. That's in the playlist at the end. As my review continues, as much as the second act has great moments and good uses of a lack of over editing for, like, drama and stuff, and more cathartic moments, it feels a little bit lacking for me, much like the main romance, featuring, of course, and Ansel Elgort, I think that's his name, as Baby Driver, with Lily James's character. However, the first heist and everything from the final heist goes bad till the last minute. So from where I started watching it today, pretty much, is a blast. Even if the unrealistic ending can be unrealistic, it's meant to be more of a romanticized ending. I still think it's really good. I just think it's just a little bit lacking, because they only really reference this type of style that the ending could be in one tiny brief part midway throughout the film, which just kind of feels a bit weird. But yeah, it does. So that does make its existence make sense. Now I can throw that away. Who does Lily James play? She plays Deborah. Of course, because the main two characters have to have names with songs that can be attributed to it. Of course, I mean, do you need me to say anything about this film, about the plot or anything? It's about a mute well, not mute. He's got a tinnitus and he listens to music, and the film is then edited to the beat of the majority of these songs, depending on the part of the film that you are watching. And it's an action heist movie with that romantic subplot, with, of course, Lily James, that further drives the film. I guess, pun intended. What can I say about Lily James's character? So she's a waitress, which is kind of the cliche, but again, her character is pretty much like a romanticized 50s aspect. So she has a shitty boss, but it's not really developed too much, because she doesn't work. Like, she's not very attentive when she's works apparently, and she's a waitress, and I mean, that's it. That's her whole character. She's a waitress who has a dream of driving like across America with music and hair and wind in her hair. That's pretty much it. So she represents the romanticism and the escapism factor for our main character. Even though driving for him is still an escape, it's still what he has to do for his job of robbing banks and stuff that is illegal, of course. And she's a good, obviously, introduction to a difference in his life. From the start of the film, after the first heist, when she appears, she's just kind of there, just a random person walking down the street. She just happens to be working at the diner that at least it's theorized, suggested in the film, that his mother used to work at, because she also had a good singing voice and was going to be a big musician before the car accident killed her and whatever. So a lot of it's also kind of like Freudian, with connecting between her and Deborah and Baby's mother. So there's that aspect to it, which inevitably can be creepy, but it's also kind of poetic in a way. So it's not bad. What can I say? So her use in the film is more or less also almost completely a necessity. Otherwise, Baby Driver would just be doing the same shit all the time. He'd just be driving the cars. If he didn't have a romantic aspect in his life, then yeah. But and it also helps to develop his character, show that he can be a good person or whatever. So her necessity in the film is definitely there for her character. And in terms of her performance, well, she's meant to be, obviously she's meant to be playing this more or less lovable waitress who's, you know, bottom of the barrel job, the waitress, and has aspirations to do something bigger, and those aspirations can be, like, realized with, by her relationship with Baby Driver. Now, of course, they never fully develop into a complete romantic relationship, more or less, until the end of the very, very end of the film. But, of course, it is even said that, like, oh, it was heading that way anyway, so yeah. But yeah, she's good in the film. Like, she doesn't have much to go on. She's always, she can play sad or scared, but not really sad, more or less just kind of scared and then happy. So she has pretty much those two emotions. She has no, like, immediate big-ass backstory of, like, you know, my father was abusive and he was a drunk and he, you know, beat my mother and then he beat me. Like, there's nothing like that. Like, there's no... She's just kind of a blank slate in terms of her background because it's not exactly important. It's more or less where she is currently and what she wants to be in the future, and that's her arc. That's what we know of her. What she is, waitress. That all paints a lot of the picture. Plus what she wants to do, her aspirations. And that's pretty much all there is to her character. She's a good actress, of course, so she plays the role as good as it needs to be played. You know, she doesn't do anything over the top or anything because she doesn't need to. She's oddly realistic for a character who doesn't live in a completely realistic world. So, yeah. Overall, Baby Driver is definitely a film worth checking out. I would highly recommend it, and now I'm going to take out the disc. Yeah. Also, I really must admit, I love the use of the Queen song at the very end of the film. It has a good soundtrack. Some of the songs I don't know, but the way that they utilize them is pretty good. Sometimes thematically, sometimes just because it sounds cool, which makes sense. I feel like the film could have maybe benefited from using some films more thematically, say like the Guardians of the Galaxy films, especially the second film uses some of its songs more thematically. Same as Mamma Mia, Here We Go Again, it uses its songs more thematically. Whereas instead of just having them as pop thingies to be like, oh, this is cool to listen to or whatever. So yeah, I wholeheartedly would recommend Baby Driver if you haven't seen it. I'd also recommend Edgar Wright as a filmmaker. He's really good. So yeah, and that's it. I'm done now. That's the whole video. So yeah, thanks for watching. Feel free to like, share, and subscribe for more. If you want to see more of these actor reviews, check them out here. You can hit the subscribe button here. I have hinted in my 2020 update as to who I might be reviewing next. Currently, the idea is to do Taylor Swift. She's a tricky one to do reviews for because she's not in many of the films that she's in. So it's going to be a very different style, I think. I'm going to tackle like 3 actual feature-length films that she's in, including that Cats movie that came out. Oh, shit. So that'll be something. I'm watching it. I haven't. It's still December right now. I haven't yet watched the film. It comes out in like a few days for me, so I'm watching it opening day here in Australia. So I have to be paying attention to the film and her performance. If I can recognize her with the CGI stuff, I should be able to. It shouldn't be too hard. Yeah, and then I will have to find the other films that she's going to be in. So I think one of them's also the Lorax. I'm hoping for the Lorax and that Valentine's Day film, and then maybe her, I think it's Reputation Stadium Tour thingy, concert thing that she did that's on Netflix. So it's vastly different things. So that'll be fun. And we'll see you then. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time. Adios. Happy 2020 as well, you know. Woohoo.